Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to have a little listen with us for the next hour or so. This session is about going live, about women who work in football broadcasting. I will introduce you in a moment. My name's Gail Davis. I've worked for Sky Sports for 20 or so years. I'm a reporter and presenter. I was thinking yesterday about my first shift in 1998 as a runner, and you can imagine just how different it is going into work today, and not just because it was a slightly crummy old building and some porter cabins, but because the whole landscape's changed. It's hard to believe then that 20 plus years I'd have had the opportunity to cover Football World Cups, Rugby World Cups, Lions tours, a Home Olympics, watch a Brit win Wimbledon. Very lucky to have done that. At the time, it felt like a bit of a battle every day, but I think it's changed so dramatically since then that anybody here today, you work hard and you've got the opportunity and you're resilient and you take feedback. There really is a great career to be had in football broadcasting, and all these women are testament to that as well. Look, there's still work to do, and we will talk about that over the next few minutes, and there will be a chance to answer some questions too, so get your thinking caps on. But rather than me sit here and tell you how fabulous they are, I'm going to get them all to tell us how fabulous they are themselves, because one of the things women don't do very well is shout about how great they are. So, Kathryn, I'm going to hand over to you for a few minutes, and you can tell us what your job is now and the journey that you've taken to get there.
Cool. So hi, everybody. I'm Kathryn Anastasi. I'm Deputy Head of talkSPORT Radio. I've been at talkSPORT for 17 years, nearly. So I started in 2007, and I've done lots of different jobs along the way. I think Alison from Chair of the Premier League earlier was saying how like every 2 years she got moved on to a different bit, and that's kind of how my career's gone. But I initially got into radio rather than sport. So I did student radio at university. I did a politics degree that wasn't particularly helpful, but quite interesting. And then I did a master's in radio straight away after that because I really liked it, and I thought, well, maybe I could do something in radio. But I had a formative experience, work experience, at BBC Radio Manchester, where I did a month there, and I did 2 weeks on air and hated it and was scared every day. And I did 2 weeks on breakfast production, and I was like, oh, great, I'm a producer. I found out what I want to do. So after that, I sent a CV to every radio station in the country, from Guernsey to Aberdeen, literally, and talkSPORT gave me a call. And so I sort of lucked into talkSPORT, but I am a sports fan. My sister played rugby for England. I've been going to Harlequins rugby since I was a kid, so it's 30 years the same seat at Harlequins, which is a bit scary. And so I started off at talkSPORT, and I've never really looked back. And what I love about the marrying of sport and radio is really intimate. It's companionship. It's being that voice to people who are maybe a bit isolated or whatever, and pairing that with sport, which has joy in it, which encapsulates society. It's just like the perfect thing, really, and I really love how sport tells society's stories. And so, yeah, started off producing, worked on Richard Keys and Andy Gray for a couple of years, so that's quite interesting.
Not sure we've got time for those stories today.
So straight off the back from Sky.
Yeah.
And then Colin Murray for a few years. But the formative moment really in my talkSPORT career was the 2013 Lions tour, which
we were both on.
We were both on, because I was one of the only people in the room who liked rugby enough to know it in detail. They said, do you want to go and produce the Lions? And I was like, yes, please. I'll go to Australia and do that. And I've never really looked back. So then OBs became my thing. I went on to become outside broadcast manager. So I've produced World Cups, Euros, cricket tours, rugby tours. I've been all over the world. Became head of live sports. So then that incorporated more live rights. And then a year ago, was asked to be deputy. So that's a bit different, a lot broader, a lot vaguer. So that's where I've landed.
And Lawrie, for you, did you always know what you wanted to do? Because you take charge, really, of the Scottish office at Sky Sports, don't you?
Yeah, so I work for Sky Sports up in the Glasgow office, and growing up I used to watch Hazel Irvine on TV, who I'm sure most of you know who Hazel is, and to this day I think she's one of the best, if not the best presenter, and I loved football, so it was this kind of obvious tie-in. Started at a local radio station in Edinburgh, Radio 4th, when I was 14, making the tea, you know, answering the phones. But what I learned back then, if you work hard and you want it enough, you will succeed. I then went to university with this girl along here, Nottingham Trent University, to do broadcast journalism in 1999. I worked on the student radio show. We had a football show called Talking Balls on a Sunday night, which used to be fun. And then after leaving university, I went to work in radio again. And then I went on to work for talkSPORT, who are no longer around. And again, did various jobs, started making the tea, then became an assistant producer, and then I was the reporter for Celtic TV. And my first day, Gordon Strachan was the manager, pulled me aside and he said, "You're not a Celtic fan." And I said, "I'm not, I support the same team as you, Gordon." We were both Hibs fans, and from then on we got on absolutely fine. Then Setanta folded, I started again, back at Sky, making the tea, and 15 years later, my job is senior planner for Sky Sports News in Scotland, which involves organising the shoots we do, speaking to the clubs, organising the cameras. And this year, I'm very excited. Scotland have qualified for a major tournament. And I'm going to Germany as part of the team to produce the Scottish output for Sky Sports News. So come on, Scotland.
I actually dread to think how many cups of tea we've probably made in our time, because you know, I started Sky in 1998, and that's basically all I did for a good 3 years. Sam, you came a few years later, didn't you, into a newsroom that was, you know, very male-dominated, wasn't it? What are your memories of that and your path to get where you are today, which is a senior producer at Sky, and Sam produces Soccer Saturday? One of the kind of highest profile, you know, programs we've got.
One of. I think, like you said, I think teas are really like theme that's going to go across all of this.
And photocopying.
Photocopying.
A lot of photocopying.
And running with scripts to get there in time. So I started, I did work experience at Sky Sports when I was at university. I went to Royal Holloway. I did work experience at Sky Sports Rugby Union, as you know, and I did work experience at BBC Radio 5 Live. I knew from going to football with my dad since I was 4 years old, I wanted to work in football in some way. We used to go to the rugby as well. We used to go to Wasps before they folded. And basically what happened was I did university radio, like you say, but mine was quite bad. I feel bad saying this, but basically it was on air from like 9 to 11, and I did it with my friend, and I didn't turn up till 10 because I didn't want to get up as early to go into. I got punished for it later on though when I joined Sky Sports News. So I got an interview with Andy Cairns, who was the head of Sky Sports News, and he was brilliant for that channel. He's an absolute pioneer, amazing guy, scary but amazing, terrifying.
But then
still find terrifying now.
In those days, weren't they?
That was
what you were dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, our team, Nick Howells, who was he was brilliant though. He was brilliant and still is there, and he's great. But yeah, so I got a job as a runner freelance at Sky Sports News, and then getting in at 3 o'clock in the morning. At my desk for 3 o'clock in the morning, or like maybe 3:10, and we used to work till midday, and it was absolutely brutal. Yeah. Brutal. 4 days on, 4 days off, and you think, oh great, 4 days off, but it was never because you're exhausted on the first day, and then all you're doing thinking, I've got to go to work tonight, and you know it's one of those where you're right. The newsroom's very different now. I did find it enjoyable, but I definitely thought there were more challenges back then, as you know. But yeah, and then basically what happened was I worked my way up at Sky Sports News. I was a runner for two years. Then I started doing the ticker and the side panel. And then worked my way up to a Strand producer looking after a show called The Morning View. I guess no one would probably remember it. It was on. Do you remember it? Yeah, probably because I used to call you.
I think
Can you
Dermot was that.
Dermot, yeah. Oh yeah, we introduced Dermot.
Ref Watch.
Yeah, and then a job came up at Sky Sports Football 6 years ago, and I was successful in that, and went on to produce EFL, Goals on Sunday, Carabao Cup, internationals, Scottish Premiership, and some Premier League games, and then our head of Premier League left to go to Formula One. So therefore, the producer of Soccer Saturday was moved to Premier League, and Gary, my boss, rung me and said, I think with your blend of Sky Sports News and the news, being a trained journalist, plus the analysis that I picked up all the way through from being a football fan and doing live football, he thought it was a perfect blend to lead Soccer Saturday, and that's where I find myself now senior producer of Soccer Saturday.
And none of it was easy. It all took us a really long time to get there, and it was tough. It was like a bit of a battle every single day you went into the office. You had to prove yourself again and again. Faye, what's your story? Because yours is slightly different. You were part of Sky Sports News for a bit and then kind of went off and found your direction in a different way.
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to work with all of these amazing women at some point. Me and Lawrie went to university together. I'm the year older, unfortunately. And then I actually started off as a PA when I left uni. I'm a trained journalist, used to work. It wasn't called, what was your show called, On the Ball?
No, Talking Balls.
Talking Balls, sorry.
How could you forget that?
Because I got sent instead to loads of different grounds, and basically it was an opportunity for me to go and get paid to watch Luton Town. That was it. I got my train journey home paid for to go and report at Kenilworth Road, which was dreamy. I did it on a flip-down Motorola. Terrible. I'm so glad none of that is ever going to get found. Otherwise, I'd get sacked from everywhere. Kathryn's my boss. I'd get sacked from talkSPORT instantly if anybody heard that. It was awful. But then when I left university, I just decided news journalism in particular was not for me. I loved sport, but it was so difficult. I was always told, oh, we've got a guy that does that. And so I thought, well, fine, I'll go into marketing as a PA, but at Sky, I was a really bad PA, terrible, as organised as I am now, which is not at all. And but I had to walk through Sky Sports Football to get to the canteen, and I got chatting to a woman who used to book runners at Sky, and basically I'd do 9 to 5 as a PA, and then in the evening I'd go and
make tea.
Log make tea. Always know someone's coffee order.
Yeah.
Best training you could ever get. I used to log for the tennis, for Goals on Sunday, and yeah, basically just did any job that they wanted me to do, including logging for NFL with a 9 to 5 job, then being told, actually, you have to do back-to-back NFL games, and they last forever. And so I'd get 2 hours sleep before then having to be back in doing my PA job. But eventually that led to me being offered a job on the assignments desk at Sky Sports News. So I joined Sky Sports News in 2002. And you were both working there then, I think. You just started. Gail was on one of the teams as well. There were actually a fair few women in those days, but it was brutal. It was really brutal. And I later went on after that to work on the news desk, properly on the news desk as an assistant news editor, and I was the only female on there, and that was really quite a difficult job to do. It was tough. And then I ended up, everybody, I'd done a lot of on-air stuff previously. Everyone's like, you've got a really authoritative, good voice for news. It's like, that's great, but I don't want to do news, I want to do sport. And so I eventually, I'd worked at Sky News Radio, I'd been at Sky Sports News in various different guises, and talkSPORT needed a breakfast newsreader on the Alan Brazil Sports Breakfast Show in 2007, same year that Kathryn started. And that's kind of where I started my on-air journey, if you like, really in sport. And then since then, I left talkSPORT after 4 years, came back again, had gone freelance, worked for 5 Live, worked back on Soccer Saturday as one of the reporters, and then went back to talkSPORT. They asked me to cover the Women's World Cup in 2019 in France, and then from that I was asked to be their England correspondent. So now I look after men's and women's for talkSPORT, and I host a lot of Premier League football additionally, until recently hosted the women's football show, and then I host the Guardian's Women's Football Weekly as well. And then
so basically she's bossing it these days, aren't you?
But yeah, what that long congregated story tells you from all of us is that it takes time.
Yeah, it really
a lot
does.
of perseverance, There's
no shortcuts. And I think back to particularly working at Sky Sports, you mentioned Keys and Gray. They were the first people I sat opposite in 1999 when I started there after university. And I do remember looking around that newsroom. There was maybe 2 or 3 women actually working in production. And for you, Kathryn, it must have been, particularly when you're on the road and particularly when we worked in actually rugby, it was so male-dominated. Do you remember how you sort of had coping mechanisms in those days?
Yeah, so it is really different now. Doha was the last tour I went on, and there was a lot more women. We had like
crew, didn't we?
We had a little crew. It was great. The rugby tours. In 2013, I was the only woman, and even the Russia World Cup 2018, there was only one other woman. But because I was also leading that World Cup, it's quite a lonely spot. And also, you go out for dinner, and everyone is a little bit scared, maybe, and just talks to you about work, and you're like, we're here for 6 weeks, guys. Let's talk about films or pizza,
music,
or something. So actually, what I found when I was on those tours, I needed to, if I was on my own in a small group, I'd make sure I had time, even if it was a couple of hours, to go for a walk or to call someone back home, or like really make sure I had that downtime, because otherwise you can go completely crazy. And then in Russia, the person's in the room at the moment actually, so I'm going to call him out. But in Russia, Lawrie was hugely important, because me and him could go off for a walk and like go for dinner and just talk about home stuff, family stuff, and like just having that trusted person. You just
that
need
ally.
one. Yeah, that trusted person where you can just not talk about work for a minute was so important. But yeah, thankfully it's changed a lot over the last few years. And yeah, Doha, I think we had 7 or 8 of us.
Yeah.
It's great.
And Sam, when you sort of sit back now, what do you think the biggest challenges were for you? You're one of the first producers who were female in Sky Sports.
I was the first female football producer for Sky Sports, and I would say the biggest challenge still is when I came back from maternity leave. And I mean, we don't need to go into it again, but I feel bad. But basically, I was in a very, very male-dominated department who it wasn't done through malice, it was done through not having a clue how to deal with this female that it was almost like my baby didn't exist. So the biggest challenge for me was coming back, and I was put on The Debate, which was a late night show. I don't know if anyone remembers it, a late night show, 10 to 11:15, roughly. I would get home at midnight. I've got a 1-year-old, and then I'd have to do it again, and I wouldn't really sleep. And then I was put on, at the same time I was doing goals on Sunday. So back in the day before COVID, I had to do all day Saturday in the office, and then Sunday. So I actually got no time as a family with my family. So that was really hard, and eventually I sort of battled to not allow that to be the case anymore. And I was eventually successful in that, where I got moved to EFL, which is brilliant, and I had a great time on EFL. But the biggest takeaway from that is we still talk about it. We were in a group last week where Gary, my boss, came into the Girls at Football, where we asked questions. I was hosting it, and he was alongside me. And he talked about it again and said, we really made a mistake with that. And I was like, yeah, you did, but we've learned from it so much that now what's great is that all these fabulous females that are coming through and at different levels within the Sky Sports football department, now we can talk about it. It's never going to happen again. We've learned from it. So they'll get the benefit of, of the experience that I had. And as long as it's better, which it is better, and everyone's learned from it, then that can only be a good thing. But that was 100% the biggest challenge. Yeah. I almost left over that.
Yeah, I mean, when I was going off on mat leave, nobody actually knew how to do my mat leave, because I've been the only female for 10 years doing my job. Yeah, and again, there's 1 or 2 that have left since. But you've taken that on, haven't you? Because we were talking when we were in that newsroom, there were no real female role models. No. I mean, you mentioned Hazel Irving, but actually where we were. And now you've made sure that you're accessible and available, and for people that are kind of going
and they
on
definitely use that.
Yeah,
which is great.
That's
so
what you want, isn't it?
Yeah, they all do. You know, I guess a bit like being like a maternal figure, I guess, for them as well. But actually the boys do as well, to be honest with you. It's quite nice to have a female there, I think, for them, because it's a bit softer, you know, rather than just... Our senior leadership team in football is male, but then after that we've got a wider leadership team where we've got 3 females on it, myself and Nia, who some of you will know, and Sarah Cheadle, who's a fabulous director. And I do feel that, yeah, we've all got different characters, and I feel that as long as we can be there and help, you know, because otherwise it's actually horrible internalizing it and not having anyone to go and like reach out to, but we're trying to change that massively in our department.
Yeah, and Faye, for you, what was the kind of motivation to keep you going? Because there were times we discussed it over the years, whether or not you'd ever get the opportunity to do what you absolutely loved, and clearly Kathryn was a big ally of yours.
Yep.
Who else really helped you and said, come on, Faye, come on?
Well, Lawrie did as well, actually. In fact, I remember seeing both of them in Moscow, and they were like, how do we get you back to talkSPORT? And I was like, well, culture has to change, first of all. Which they did, by the way, because they listen. You know, that's the best thing. You need bosses who listen. A lot of the time, the hardest thing is that, you know, you feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall and nobody's listening and there's no progress being made. And there are fights going on behind the scenes. You just don't always necessarily know because you're not privy to them all. And yeah, I mean, I think I've spoken to all of you at some point in my career, when I became a mum, when I've changed jobs, lots of times that I've just thought, I don't have the fight in me anymore. I'm really tired of this. I'm really tired. Because it does feel like a fight sometimes. But then I also, I really don't want to sound cliched when I say this, but when you're really passionate about something, you really want to do something, and you really know you've got a skill for it, you just think, no, I'm not going to get told no again. I'm going to show you instead. And so my mantra has always been, okay, you don't think I can do this, well, I'll just show you that I can somewhere else, it's fine. You've got to be really resilient to do that. Yeah. And there are some times where I doubt myself, or you know, I think I don't understand why I'm not getting that opportunity and somebody else is. Well, sometimes it's just subjective, suck it up. Yeah. That's what it is. This industry is very, you know, difficult. You're at the whim of whoever is your boss, whoever comes in, wants their own people in at different times. And I think with age, I've just realized that actually sometimes I'm not going to be for everyone. That's fine. I just have to be, oh God, I'm going to do this again. It's like Journey Bingo, me and my husband play. Many times you go, be true to yourself, be authentic. But it's true, isn't it? I think really, I always just think, I'm not going to do something I'm not comfortable with. I'm not going to put myself in a position I'm not comfortable with. I'm not going to suck something up just to get a job if I don't agree with it. I'm just always very true to myself, and that's stood me in good stead. Yeah, and I think that's taken a while for probably all of us. We'll touch on that maybe at the end when we talk about the advice we would have given ourselves when we were younger. But Lawrie, I'm interested, we talk about how brutal our newsroom was at times at Scotland. In Scotland, it was pretty tough as well. I mean, Gordon Strachan and you hit it off immediately, but there were probably people up there that really questioned your position.
There was, but I think, you know, again, maybe a wee bit sort of forward with regards to advice, but I think I always treated people how I wanted to be treated. The minute you put a football player, manager, whoever, on a pedestal, they'll act up to it. If you just talk to them how you want to be spoken to, they respect that. So I've always done that in my career. Some people might not like it, but it seems to have worked so far. But I think what the girls were saying as well, that if you don't like something and you're miserable, you can change it, and you know, feel brave enough to do that and stick by your principles. And yeah, you might not be the best person for the job, you might not get the job, but it's probably not the right job for you. There'll be something else around the corner. But I think as long as you're always, again, what Faye said, true to yourself, you know, that's what you're not going to be fake for someone for the sake of it. And I think in Scotland, it's maybe a wee bit better, because I think a lot of Scottish people, what you see is what you get, and it's just how it is. And we've got inspirational women up there. We've talked about Hazel Irvine, but we've got Ailey Barber, who started like everyone here as a runner, Emma Dodds, you know, everyone, we all started at the bottom and worked our way up. And I think we all probably appreciate our positions more because we've done all the jobs, and you treat everyone the same on the way up because you don't know who you're going to meet on the way back down. So just always be kind, and always be true to yourself.
Lawrie makes that sound quite simple, you know, speaking up. But when you're in your 20s and you feel like this could be the only opportunity you've got, I mean, how hard is that to balance? You know, the sort of challenges that you had, the things that sort of you had to question along the way.
Yeah, so I think I told you a story from literally the first day I started when I was 22. So everyone outside of work calls me Kate. And I got to talkSPORT and they made my email address Kathryn, because that's what's on my CV. And I just didn't have the courage to correct people. So I've been Kathryn ever since. Kathryn is now, I kind of own it, and I quite like having those two kind of Kathryn at work.
Alter ego.
Yeah. So, but at the time, it was just sheer fear. And it was really intimidating, you know. There was a couple of women working on programming and a couple of women sort of doing more kind of admin side of things, but it was a really Nuts or Zoo kind of, if you know those magazines from the late 90s.
Right. Oh my goodness.
That's the kind of atmosphere, really, that it
just
was.
reminded me of the Soccer AM bit. Do you remember in Sky Sports where there's basically just a wall of naked ladies?
Yeah.
You'd have to walk past every time you wanted to go and get your breakfast. Yeah. But that's just what happened, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the live TV era. So it was definitely a bit different, and I found that a little bit intimidating. I would say though, like, I am quite a bolshy person.
I think that probably runs in all of us if you hadn't noticed. I do think you needed that survival mechanism a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, and so like I've not been shy about coming forward when I believe in something, and I've definitely let people know when I think they've stepped out of line. But I think that also had a bit of a double-edged sword when I was right at the beginning as well, because I was really defensive when anyone gave me feedback, because I was like, no, I can do this. Like I know what I'm doing, and actually I just didn't listen properly. And I think some people were trying to help rather than just be, you know, what are you doing here? So I think it's being able to sift through, like listen, because feedback is neither sort of negative nor positive, really.
But it's great if you get it.
You decide whether you want to hold on to it or not, but listen to everything. And then you can pick through and decide what you're going to keep as helpful and what you're going to throw away. Yeah. So I wish I'd done that a little bit more earlier on. But yeah, now I still tell people what I think quite often. But.
Yeah. And before we talk about some of the proudest moments, maybe some of the funny moments, they thought that women went on tour because your bags were...
Yeah, that was a classic question I got from a boss when he was saying that there's no female outside broadcast producers for games. I was like, yeah. And he was like, why is that? Is it because the bags are heavy? I was like, nope. No, don't think so. They have wheels. So yeah, that was bad. And then I'm sure you guys have been the only woman in a room at meetings and stuff. And there was a big senior leadership meeting. I was OB manager at the time, and they were discussing who should book taxis. And my boss just went, oh, do you sort the taxis? Singled me out. And that is that kind of like, and I did tell him immediately after the meeting not to do that. But yeah, it's that kind of assumption that you're the person who books the taxis or makes the tea. Photocopies, which I find really annoying.
Yeah. I had a chief executive from a major sporting organisation about a month ago ask me where the toilet was because he thought I was a waitress at a hotel. And I think you had the same at a Premier League match recently.
Yeah, I was producing Crystal Palace, can't remember who they're playing, but I was at Crystal Palace, and I'm kind of, part of me is kind of buzzing for this because people obviously thought I was young enough to be a runner. So I got asked, I got asked if I could make tea for the sound guys, and then I got someone from Crystal Palace saying, oh, where's your producer? Where's your producer today? Because I need to go and talk to him. And I was like, oh no, that's me. And he was like, what? I was like, yes. And then, as I say, the sound guys, I went, I haven't really got, I'm really sorry, I've not got time to make you a tea. I said, and I stupidly went, but in about 10 minutes, once I've had a little meeting, I might be able to. And I was like, what am I doing? So
you never lose it.
No, but you know what? I do think I went back and I was like, oh, and then but they realised that I was actually producing the thing, and I think they were a little bit mortified. But yeah, it's natural, and it is that like unconscious bias that we are working really hard, and so many people and so many guys in our company that's working so hard to overcome that, but there is still there. And that wasn't none of those worked for Sky. They were all outside people, but it was still, apart from the sound guys, but they were like outsourced. They weren't our staff, but it still showed that it's still there.
Yeah. Faye, talk to me about your proudest moment then. Because we are inspiring today, and through all the cups of tea and the photocopying, everyone wants to hear.
I've got a few.
You can
I'll just
take it away.
Over them quickly. I think my main proudest moment, actually, or my first one, was when I was asked to go on Soccer Saturday, because it was a really big deal.
Yeah.
There was only Bianca and Michelle Owen at the time, and my granddad watched that programme, and I watched it with him, and my granddad had passed away not long before I was asked to go on Soccer Saturday. And so that was just incredible to be part of such an iconic show when it's notoriously impossible to get onto it. Was like, super proud for that. Being made England correspondent as well, it just felt really prestigious. It still does. I pinch myself. I get to travel the world following England, and all the stories that are going on and covering any kind of major tournament is just incredible. And then I was really proud, although it happened by default, and I'm still really gutted for Adrian Durham, who's our chief football presenter at talkSPORT. My little boy was 4 months old when or maybe slightly old, maybe 5 months old, but I hadn't been back at work for very long, and I got a phone call saying, Aid's got COVID, we need you to host the Carabao Cup final. I was like, shit. Like 2 days notice.
Yeah.
And I'm like a meticulous prepper.
Yeah.
And I was like, I am not ready for this. I'd had a punami situation in the cafe moments beforehand with my son. But doing that, and I'm my harshest critic, and I listen back to it so much I could have done better, but I need to hold on more to the fact that I hosted the Carabao Cup final at Wembley.
With a 4-month-old child.
With a 4-month-old child, yeah. And then going out to Doha and doing that with an incredible team at talkSPORT was, and the fact we had so many women. I don't mean to Kathryn's right. It was huge, because when I first started at talkSPORT in 2007, women didn't go on tours. We just didn't go on any of the tours, particularly the football ones. And there's some notorious ones as well that I'm really glad we didn't go on. But yeah, the fact that there was a good group of us out there was really, and I'm proud that I'm at a point now where people ask my advice for how to do this job, which feels like
you're doing it.
A privilege every day.
Yeah, amazing. Sam, for you, was it first Soccer Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's got to be. I mean, there's lots of milestones where you go, oh God, I'm actually producing, as you say, like a final or something like that. But I think being given such a big gig and being trusted with that, I don't think I can see really past that, to be honest with you, because, and also what we've made it into, it's such a happy, fun team on and off screen. Because
there's a lot of pressure that
there is
goes into that job.
But you know what? I think before, like we were talking about when we were younger, and we'd be like, we'd have to take every opportunity, and even if we were absolutely exhausted, and it was, we couldn't let anyone down. And I've got so much more perspective now, having had a child, that I'm like, people are like, I can't believe how you're just quite chilled about it, and because it's not life and death. Yeah. It's great to do a good job, and we want to be at the top of our game, and I think that the team that we have got on and off screen are at their top of their game. But if something goes wrong, we're all fallible, we're all human, and it's not one of those ones where you'll still be hearing about it 3 weeks later, because it's just, it happens, and it's like back in the day. Yeah, but back in the day, you would be like, oh my God, absolutely world's ended. But now it's like, no, we're all human. There's a lot of perspectives, a lot of bad things going on in this world. So if we can bring a bit of joy, as you said, to the audience, and if it goes wrong a little bit, it goes wrong. That's what I'd say.
And Lawrie, I think you're probably hoping it comes this summer, aren't you?
When Scotland win the Euro. Absolutely. Well, I mentioned earlier that Faye and I went to university together, and when we were at university, David Platt was the manager of Nottingham Forest. Do you remember? Yeah. And for my radio show, Talking Balls, that I keep promoting. Anyway,
I don't remember it.
Yeah, there must be. We must find it. It was with actually Mark Scott, who does Match of the Day, and Adam Somerton, who's a commentator on TNT now as well. So, it'll probably appear somewhere. And I went to interview David Platt with Adam Somerton, and we're getting the microphone out, and David Platt looked at Adam and said, right, when you're ready. And I said, well, it's actually me that's doing the interview. And he went, you? And I said, yeah. I says, is there an issue? And he said, well, you're, and I just cut him off and went, Scottish. And it was the week that Sven-Goran Eriksson had been appointed the England manager. And I basically got a line out of him that we sold to IRN. We made the radio station money because he said, as an ex-England international, it should have been an England. It shouldn't have been a foreign manager. It should have been an England manager. And it then turned out to be controversial because he ended up going to be the under-21 manager. So I think that was very much the first time I thought, no, I can do this job. And then when Scotland qualified for their first major tournament in 20 years, I don't know if any of you guys were on that morning meeting. I couldn't talk for crying. I think I was up the whole night crying because I was so proud. But yeah, I'm hoping it comes this summer, and I'm very lucky to be going as part of the Sky Sports News team out to Germany. So hopefully I'll see you all there.
And Kathryn, for you, you've got a long list of major tournaments, but the sort of moment for you so far in your career that sort of sticks out?
I was just thinking about it when these guys were talking, because I can sort of, there's lots of moments. 2013, being in Sydney, winning the Lions Tour, that was amazing. But I think the one that really springs to mind, it was in Doha last year, and there's a producer at talkSPORT called Izzy, who was on audio 4 years ago, nearly 5 years ago now. And she wasn't enjoying it. She didn't like it. And she came to me and she said, I want to do live. And so we put a plan in place. And I said, okay, what's your goal? And she was, I want to do a tournament. And so we got her there. And she's now a live sport producer, does football matches 3 a week sometimes. But it was a moment, she was doing the first Wales game. And we were stood on the gantry looking out at the empty stadium. I love an empty stadium. Match day -1 is like my favourite. And I just said, you need to take all this. Look what you've achieved. And that makes me feel really warm and fuzzy because I'm a people. I like working with people and structuring teams and all that kind of stuff. So to have her develop in that way, I think that's probably my proudest moment so far.
I mean, we touched on the being mistaken for waitresses and tea makers and whatever else. What do you think the next sort of challenges are going to be? It's obviously come a long way since the days of 1998 and turning up at people's houses. It happened to me. You turned up at people's houses and they said, we don't believe you're the reporter. They wouldn't let you in. It's moved on. It's
definitely moved on.
But there are still kind of challenges ahead.
Yeah, and I think there's visible. I think stuff like this is great because it's going out to tell people that you don't just have to be on air to get in football. Like there's loads of different careers if you want to work in broadcasting and football or any sport. It's just loads out there for you to do, and it's finding that person to have a coffee with you and doing that. So I think there's still a little bit of outreach, basically, giving people permission. I did have some stats for basically. I also work with the NCTJ a little bit. And they said to me that in 2021-22, there's only 7% of women on their courses, sports journalism courses. And they've raised it to 14% the year after, and it's 20% this year. They're aiming for 25% next year. So that just fills me with so much hope. It's about getting women in at the beginning, giving them permission, understanding it is for them, it's a place where they can be. So I think we've definitely moved on. And also, I think Gen Z, I am that older generation now. Gen Z is different. I don't, from speaking to a few people at work recently, they don't get the DMs and the inappropriate behaviour in the same way that perhaps
we had it on a daily basis. As part of going to work sometimes, wasn't it?
I think that behaviour's grown up with us, unfortunately, maybe a little bit. But I'm really positive and feeling excited about the future, next generation.
It's interesting you say that because I guess the next really big step will be boardrooms, decision makers, proper senior leadership roles. Because until the women are in those positions, it's very hard to understand what you went through when you came back from mat leave, or the juggle that I deal with like every day, and the sacrifice of whether or not you go to these tournaments, and it's real life. And I think that's probably the challenge. And you sort of said that behaviour's sort of grown up. So that's maybe the area that most needs to be worked on.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it's getting it to the, our leadership team on talkSPORT is pretty good in terms of gender balance. There's definitely other areas of diversity that we need to work on. But it's that next level up that really needs a bit of work on it.
Yeah, and optics look great. You see a lot of women pitchside. You see a lot of women presenting. There are women producing. But I was in Seville doing the Champions League a few months ago, and there was over 40 people in the press conference, and I was the only woman. So there's still areas, isn't there, Lawrie, that women don't feel that they properly belong.
Yeah, I think there is, but I think it's important as well to celebrate, as Sam had mentioned earlier, how far that we have come, because 20 years ago there might not have been one woman in there. So I'm not saying it's good, but it is a lot better, and I think it's important to celebrate that and appreciate how far we've come, due to probably people like us dealing with a lot of shit back in the day, and fighting that fight, but keep fighting the fight, because it will come. And in Scotland there are a lot of women in various jobs, and directors' jobs, presenting jobs. That there are women there, but I think it's just giving someone that belief that you can do that. If you want to be a camera person or a sound person or a producer or a director, you can do it. If you're good enough and you're willing to work hard enough, you're not just entitled to do it because you're a woman, but if you want to work hard enough, why not? You can do anything you want to do.
I think just following up that, we were talking before, weren't we, about, and you've touched on it now, is that when we were starting, the only jobs that would seem available in sport were presenting or reporting. You saw like Kirsty Gallagher, Kelly Cates, Gabby Logan doing great, and you never even contemplated. I just know I wanted to work in sport. But when I went to Sky Sports News, I saw all these, and I saw Halsey just bossing everyone around and making the decisions, and I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do.
That's what I'm born to do.
I want to do this. And so, there are, and I think when you're looking at going into the sporting industry, you think that's the only options. Gosh, there's so many options, as you just said. You listed them all. There's so many, directing, producing, sound. There's all sorts of, news desk, planning. There's so much more, and you're not just restricted to reporting and presenting.
Yeah, I guess the other big challenge, a few of us have talked about, and there is no easy answer, is online hate. That's kind of a huge barrier. It's just really uncomfortable, isn't it, for, male and women, but particularly at the moment, we've seen quite a few women in the spot. Have you got any advice?
Turn it off.
Yeah, that's all you can really do, isn't it?
You shouldn't have to, should you?
No, absolutely shouldn't have to. Report it 100%. I personally have been very lucky. I'll get bits and bobs, but I've got lots of filters on now. But I feel really awful saying this because social media is so important, but it really isn't. It so isn't. There's way more people not on social media than are on social media. It's important to a point, but somebody in their pants in their bedroom's opinion of me is not really.
So you've got to remember, is someone in their pants.
You just have to remember that.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's bots or whatever. And so, don't have an echo chamber of people who just literally think you're bloody brilliant, but certainly sit and really think of the context of who's messaging you. If they're choosing to take time out of their day to send you something nasty, are they really somebody you want to, whose opinion you want to take on board?
We've got a few more minutes before we open it up, so I'm just really interested for all of you to give a bit of advice to everybody out there who's starting their career, and maybe something you might have said to yourself. And having sort of spoken to you all, I think we're all kind of along the similar lines. Kathryn, I'm going to start with you, because you've got a really personal story that gives you a different perspective about where you are now. But essentially, it's about not being the be-all and end-all, isn't it? I think for all of us, we've learned that, haven't we, over the years?
Yeah, so actually leads on to your point, Sam, about perspective. So in 2021, I was diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer. And I was working really hard. It was just coming out of COVID. The Euros was on, the delayed Euros. We had the Lions tour to South Africa, which was a disaster, really. And we were trying to get to America for an a Fury fight, and it was almost impossible. And I was so stressed. And then, I found blood in my poo, and it's really changed how I feel about work, because it's not really important. It's nice to have money. It's nice to interact with people and do something that you like. But I take it home way less than I used to, because it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Yeah. And like, yeah, we did all battle. Sorry, I'm getting a bit like, we did all battle to get where we are in our careers, but I really wish I battled less.
I loved it when you said dial down.
Dial it down, just one.
Yeah, dial down.
Just dial it down, the determination and the ambition. And like,
that made me smile.
Just one. Like, I'm maybe was at a 9. Maybe now I'm at an 8.
Yeah.
Like, well, but what does 8? Who's going to notice? No one else is going to notice. Just you.
I just think it's a different era. You touched on it before, Sam. Like, it just felt like you had to do this. This was going to be your one opportunity.
Yeah, where you've got to take every opportunity. You know, I've got to be up at 1:30 a.m. every day because nothing's going to come along again. Yeah. When actually, I think my advice would probably be to be brave and think that, you know what, actually, it probably would come along again. I can maybe jump across to the...
Because I'm good enough.
And I can do it. Jump across the BBC, jump across to talkSPORT. Yeah. You know, it's not just the be-all and end-all is where you are. There's so many more opportunities out there, and not to get so hung up. Exactly what you said. Dial it down. I think I just gave far too much to very early at Sky, and then life experiences have taught me to not stress as much about that. And I think my advice to my younger self would probably be go and work in the city because you learn more.
And you get your weekends off.
Exactly. It's such a joy. You never feel you're at work. You know, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
But you know, I think I would have got there without all of the huge stress. I think my anxiety, I must have been working at like this level of anxiety for a long time.
And I think a lot of people were
100%. And a lot of females.
Males were as well.
Yeah,
that
a lot
was
of
the
females.
environment, but I think because there was less of us.
You had to prove yourself a little bit more.
Yeah, and there wasn't, you know, really that many people you could kind of bounce off and say, this is really bad, isn't it? We shouldn't be doing this. And what about for you, Lawrie? What advice would you give your young 14-year-old self?
I think what the girls are saying, take risks. I mean, I was very much the same. I was working in a radio job, which I hated and I was miserable, but I was scared to leave because if I left that, what if I didn't get another job? But I did eventually leave and I got into television. I should have done it earlier because I was miserable. So take risks. If you're unhappy or you're working, as Sam was, like through the night, you can't physically or possibly do that. And, you know, as we've talked about life experience, what Kathryn's been through, people that have had kids, I think COVID maybe made us all kind of reset as well. And you kind of thought, wait a minute here, there's more important things and you can do things differently. You don't have to be in the office at 8 o'clock for that meeting. You can join online, which means you can have, you know, go to the gym before work or whatever. And I think, you know, we're all getting to a set, well, I speak for the women on the stage, certainly, not you young people in this room.
Just you.
Yeah, just me. We all get to a certain age and, you know, families maybe aren't around. You know, I've got a lot of friends that have lost parents in the last few years, and it just makes you realise that things like that are important.
Priorities.
And, you know, and I used to, I can't take any time off during the football season, but now I go,
changed,
you know what?
It has, hasn't it?
I'm doing it.
Yeah, and that's, What for you, Faye?
In terms of advice?
Yeah.
I'd love to...
You've clearly got an amazing perspective now, haven't you?
That's taken hard work. And other people and coaching and, you know, various different kind of sit back and have a think. But I think I'd always just say I'll always find a way to make money if money is the priority. You know, I can always work behind a bar. It's absolutely fine. Yeah. You know, it's my second. No, it's not my second home. I don't really do that.
A small child, it's not. Just got a very good babysitter.
But we're all resourceful people.
Yeah.
There's always, if somebody pulled the rug from underneath my feet today versus 10 years ago, 10 years ago I'd have been devastated and thought, oh my God, this is the end of the world.
It's given us resilience, I think, hasn't
100%.
it?
100%. Yeah. Nowadays, I'm very much, pull it away, okay, I'll work out how to get back on my feet and find another rug to go and play with.
We've got very few minutes. If anybody has a question, hands up quickly, because we've got Emma Hayes to come. Has anybody got, yes, please, go, shout, shout, shout. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Linda. I'm an international researcher and sports physio. My question is basically around the growth mindset that you've all shown in a patriarchal environment. Is there like a key piece of advice or say, like, was there a goal that you hung on to say, that's when I know I've made it, or that is where I want to be, that's my platform and that's where I'm going to queen, or, you know, whichever terminology you want to use, but, you know, was there a point in time where you were like, this is my goal, this is where I am and I have made it, to justify it to yourself?
Should we get Kathryn?
I don't think I ever had a specific goal. I always knew I wanted to go up. But I think for me, it was always the kind of, my motivator was making it more fair. And that's still my motivator. And I think I can probably own it and say, like, I'm a trailblazer at talkSPORT. I'm the most senior woman. I have been for a long time.
I think I can own it. You
Yeah.
can own
I
it.
can
you
own
can.
it.
That's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can own it. Yeah.
And that's massively, and sometimes when it's hard, that's what keeps me going, because I want more women to come through. I want it to be a fairer, better, more diverse place. So that's my goal.
I think that's probably a very good place to end, actually, isn't it? With those words, I think you've all absolutely inspired everybody out there. So thank you very much for your time. And we are going to shift out the way because another trailblazer is on her way in, isn't she? So we're going to leave you in the company of Emma Hayes next.